In fact, I think that's what I'm going to start saying from now on. It's a national security threat for Muslims to be working in TSA. Why do I have to go through the humiliation ritual of showing my passport to some Muslim bitch in a hijab with a heavy accent?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Genuinely glad you're here for this one because this might be one of the most eye-opening things we've covered in a while. So here is what is happening in this video. Laura Loomer, a figure who has been extremely close to one of the most powerful political circles in America, walked into a room full of Indian journalists, and things did not go the way she expected. These journalists came prepared. They came with receipts, and they confronted her directly on statements she has made about Indian people, about immigrants, and about Muslims. What unfolds is one of those rare moments where someone actually has to stand face to face with their own words and answer for them. There is a moment toward the end of this video that genuinely caught me off guard. So do yourself a favor and stay all the way through because the last few minutes hit different. Also, before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from right now. Seriously, every time I read through the comments and see how many different countries and cities are represented, it blows me away. So tell me where you are at. All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, and first of all, I'm sorry that you went through that all. That's
Thank you.
that's it's like the Trumpification of US politics. The idea that you can scare, intimidate, and bully somebody out of the public sphere by using force or just threatening them. Think about what Donald Trump has done to Mike Pence. He's kind of receded from public life because Donald Trump's wanted to hang him. Think about Liz Cheney. Think about all of these people that have sort of receded from public life. It is like mafia tactics. That's why it's so incredibly important, and I'm so incredibly proud of you for doubling down. Continue to go out in these spaces.
Thank you.
That's why we do this every single Saturday. That's why you run the Mike Nellis channel. We continue to push this. And this brings us on to the Laura Loomer news of today. So, I mean, this is some wild stuff. In the first clip, somebody that goes by the name of Rajdeep comes up and confronts Laura Loomer at this Indian conference. And Laura Loomer was basically about to cry. He goes, "Your remarks are brazenly racist and Islamophobic."
You made a statement. If Kamala Harris wins, the White House will smell like curry and speeches will be facilitated via a call center. You then went on to say our country was built by white Europeans, not third world invaders from India. I think you should do more than just express regret. From what I can see, you're brazenly racist and Islamophobic. And I'm sorry to say that we have Atiti Devo Bhava in this country where we welcome all, but your comments smack of anti-Indianism, worse still, Islamophobia, and even worse, racism, which has no place, ma'am, in today's world. So get real, ma'am. Sorry to say that, but that comments are unacceptable to me as an Indian and as a world citizen.
And what Laura Loomer has said multiple times in the past, let me just read this tweet that she made 3 days ago. She said, Laura Loomer, this is Laura Loomer. She said, "Every time I travel and a Muslim in a hijab asks to see my passport at TSA, I just want to say, fuck you, how dare you, take your hijab off and maybe then I'll show you. I am disgusted that the airport in Atlanta has so many Muslims working in TSA. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to start saying from now on. It's a national security threat for Muslims to be working in TSA. Why do I have to go through the humiliation ritual of showing my passport to some Muslim bitch in a hijab with a heavy accent?"
This is exactly the kind of story that people need to hear because it shows you something that statistics never can. This wasn't some abstract political debate. This was a real person, Mike Nellis, a consultant, a father, somebody running a business and employing people who got caught in the crossfire of someone using political influence like a personal weapon. Adam called it exactly what it is. He said it is like mafia tactics, and that framing is correct. Because what do mafia tactics actually mean? It means you don't beat your enemy with better arguments. You make them afraid to show up at all. You go after their staff. You go after their income. And if none of that works, you escalate until they go quiet. That's not politics. That's intimidation dressed up in political clothing. And here's what people don't realize about that dynamic. When ordinary people see someone go through what Mike described, most of them make a quiet decision. They decide it is not worth it. They stay off camera. They keep their head down. And the people doing the intimidating count on that. They need the silence more than they need the win. So the fact that Mike doubled down matters way more than it might seem on the surface. Now this is where the segment gets genuinely shocking, because it moves from personal experience directly into Laura Loomer's actual public statements. Adam reads a tweet she posted just 3 days before this recording, and I want you to really absorb what was said. She called it a national security threat for Muslims to be working in TSA. That's not an old post. That's not something she walked back. That got 4 million views. And the reason that number matters is because reach equals influence. 4 million people saw that framing. Some percentage of them now carry that idea without even remembering where they got it. That is how this kind of thinking spreads, not through debate, through repetition and volume. And then Adam lands the line that recontextualizes everything. She is advising the President of the United States. She is having meetings with the President of the United States, so we are not talking about a random account posting inflammatory content into the void. We are talking about someone with a direct line to actual power. That changes everything about how you have to look at this.
This is Laura Loomer. This got 4 million views. She is advising the President of the United States. She is having meetings with the President of the United States, and that is why she got confronted. Now, this takes me on to another topic that I always talk about. We've talked about this on CNN before, too, when it comes to Mike Johnson downplaying Islamophobia. The Republicans in power for the past few decades have mainstreamed a type of Islamophobia, hatred towards trans people, hatred towards immigrants, people across the spectrum. But now they are being hoisted by their own petard, so to speak. They're being eaten by their own monster. Over the past few decades, they have mainstreamed this type of bigotry, and now they're wondering why 50% of young Republicans are Holocaust deniers, are anti Semitic. Randy Fine, who quite literally compared Muslims to dogs, he said, if they force us to choose, the choice between dogs and Muslims is not a difficult one. That is a Republican representative, Randy Fine. You can find that online. He said that. It's still up on Twitter.
Yep.
He then curls up in a ball and cries and doesn't understand why there's hatred coming from young groypers, Nick Fuentes fans. You have to stop all bigotry. You can't just pick and choose. So that's why I also like this second interaction that happened where another Indian journalist on stage named Preeti Choudhury begins to, quote, take the piss out of Laura Loomer by confronting her on stage. This clip is great as well.
First up, would you want some water or are you carrying your own?
Oh, I think I'm fine. Yeah.
You're good? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So there have been certain tweets, Laura, which, because you're in India right now, and you know what you've done, and let me say this, it's a feat, because by the virtue of those tweets, you've done the impossible. You've got the left in India and the right in India come together and being uncomfortable with those tweets. So in that way, you know, there's a lot to thank you because that rarely ever happens in India.
Wow.
But they've come together in the criticism, Laura, of some of your tweets earlier. You've deleted most of them. On what you perceive is your image of India and Indians. Do you regret it? Because you deleted them, so that's why I ask you.
Well, Twitter deleted some of them. I had no choice but to delete some of them because Twitter actually locked my account, believe it or not. In the aftermath of that, they actually, restricted my account.
I think that Laura Loomer is disgusting, despicable, and embodies the type of sick Republican politics that have been mainstreamed. And overall, this is backfiring on Republicans. They are now splitting up within their coalition because Nick Fuentes and his base are so incredibly hateful. They just spare nobody. They hate not only trans people, immigrants, Black people, Indian people, but they also hate Jewish people, which people like Ben Shapiro, who is obviously Jewish, doesn't like. He's like, listen, I'm okay with being silent and blind at the trans hatred. In fact, Ben Shapiro throws out some misleading trans statistics every once in a while to spread that hatred, but he doesn't understand that you have to stop all bigotry before it enters the movement.
Well, and not only that, because I've debated his buddy Michael Knowles, right?
You have to understand what Adam is describing here because it is one of the most important political patterns playing out right now. He said they are being eaten by their own monster. And that is not just a colorful phrase. That is an accurate description of what happens when you spend years treating certain types of hatred as useful tools and then act surprised when those tools turn on you. Here is the historical parallel that makes this crystal clear. In the early 20th century, multiple European political movements deliberately stoked extreme nationalist anger to win elections and consolidate power. They believed they could control it, direct it, use it when useful, and set it aside when not. Every single one of them eventually discovered that you cannot selectively deploy mass resentment once it is normalized. Just it grows on its own logic. What Adam is describing is that same dynamic happening in real time inside a modern political coalition. And then he brings up Randy Fine, a sitting Republican representative, who said, and this is a direct quote Adam reads on camera, "If they force us to choose, the choice between dogs and Muslims is not a difficult one. I need you to sit with that for a second. That is an elected official. That statement is still publicly available." And the response from party leadership? Silence. Because the moment you start policing that kind of language, you risk losing the voters who applauded it. So you say nothing, and the silence becomes permission. What makes the India Today moment so layered is what Priya Shudri pointed out on stage. She told Laura Loomer directly that by the virtue of those tweets, you've done the impossible. You've got the left in India and the right in India come together in being uncomfortable with those tweets. Think about what that means. In one of the most politically divided democracies on earth, a country where left and right agree on almost nothing, Laura Loomer managed to unite them in discomfort. That is not a win. That is a measuring stick for how far outside acceptable political behavior those statements actually were. And this is the part that blows my mind. Adam's closing point here is so simple and so devastating. You have to stop all bigotry before it enters the movement. Not some of it. Not the kind aimed at people you don't like. All of it. Because the people pushing that hatred do not make the distinctions you are hoping they will make. They never do.
And by the way, the two of them are fighting hardcore this
Yeah.
week for reasons that I don't fully understand. But like on the trans stats in particular, they lie about the number of like trans shooters that we've had over the last decade. They're claiming that like every school shooting that we've had in the last decade is from a trans individual, which couldn't be further from the truth. The vast majority of them are from white cis males, which they don't just want to address the fact that they've created a culture on the right that lets people go down these rabbit holes of conspiracy theories and end up doing that. But when there's an incident where somebody might be of a different color, or it might be like this, like the situation with the bomb, the makeshift bomb this week that somebody threw at Jake Lang, they're like, oh, there's an epidemic of Islamo-fascist terrorism in America today, and we have to shut it all down. And I'm like, hey, can we do something about the fact that when I drop my kid off at school every morning, I worry that the crazy guy's going to show up with an AR-15 and shoot him? Like, because I worry about that as a parent. But back to Loomer and Randy Fine for a second, because these are two individuals who historically have, and I've talked to, I don't know if you've ever talked to Joe Walsh about this, but I do my show with Joe every Friday on Substack. But Joe has talked about how there's an element inside the Republican Party's coalition, the MAGA coalition, that is very racist and Islamophobic, and they've got a play to that. But usually those folks have not had like a hand on the wheel of driving it, right? They've had to sort of dog whistle to keep them in the tent, to make them feel like they were a part of it. And Joe has expressed how he regrets ever pandering to those people in the first place. But now the inmates run the asylum. And I want to remind people of two stories that highlight Laura Loomer's influence with Donald Trump. One is that, by the way, she travels with him somewhat frequently. I think she's it's been a little while since she's done it because Susie Wiles has been keeping her out. But Susie Wiles is about to be leaving as chief of staff at the end of the year. So I worry that Loomer's going to weasel her way back in. But at the beginning of Trump's second term here, she flew to DC, she lives in Florida, I believe. She flew to DC, went to the White House, and had a list of people that she wanted fired inside the intelligence community, I think as part of the NSA, because they were too pro-Muslim in her view. And Donald Trump fired every single one of them the very next day after she handed him her list. That's number one. The second thing is, in the height of Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people, the attacks on the Palestinian people, the starvation, there were a bunch of kids who really needed serious medical attention, who were flown to the United States. Laura Loomer saw this story, had an absolute meltdown on Twitter, and the next day, Trump's administration banned having Palestinian kids come to the United States for medical attention. And so this is the kind of stuff that happens, is you have a mentally unwell human being who is banned from multiple social media sites, not allowed to push things because she's a known liar and a threatener and a conspiracy theorist, who has access to the president of the United States, who whispers sweet nothings in his ear and gets the government to move based on her whims and fears, which is really, really scary to me. I mean, and again, I've experienced this personally. Like, a crazy person on the internet created a conspiracy theory about me that forced me to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight the House Judiciary Committee. Now, I'm doing fine financially. I'll be okay with that. But think about all the people that she goes after, including little Palestinian kids who've done nothing wrong, no matter how you feel about that conflict over there, who need medical attention. That, to me, is really scary, because the inmates should never be running the asylum in any political party.
This final stretch is where the conversation stops being about rhetoric and becomes about documented consequences, and that is the shift that should make every single person watching sit up straight. Mike Nellis lays out two specific stories, not opinions, not theories, specific events with specific outcomes. He describes how Laura Loomer flew to Washington, walked into the White House, and handed over a list of intelligence professionals she personally wanted removed because in her view they were too sympathetic toward a particular religious group, and the very next day, every single person on that list was gone. Let that land, a private citizen, no elected position, no security clearance, no official role of any kind, handed a list to the most powerful office in the world and got results within 24 hours. Mike said it plainly. And now the inmates run the asylum, and he is right. The second story is the one that genuinely stopped me. Palestinian children, kids who needed urgent medical care, had been brought to the United States for treatment. Laura Loomer had a public meltdown about it online, and the following day, the policy changed. Those children were no longer allowed to receive that care here. I am not going to add dramatic language to that. The facts are dramatic enough on their own. A Twitter post changed government policy affecting sick children. That is the actual reality of what unchecked influence looks like when it operates without accountability. And here is what I think people miss when they talk about this kind of influence. It is not just about the specific decisions. It is about the signal those decisions send to everyone watching. When government moves that fast in response to one person's public outrage, it tells every other person with a grievance and a platform exactly what the playbook is. It rewards the loudest and the most extreme. It punishes patience and process. And over time, that feedback loop shapes who seeks power and how they seek it. Mike ends with a line that I think is the most important thing said in this entire segment. The inmate should never be running the asylum in any political party. Not this party, not that party, any party. Because the problem here is not purely partisan. It is structural. It is about what happens to any system, political or otherwise, when the people with the least accountability end up with the most access. History has answered that question many times. The answer is never good. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.